السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه، والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Today, brothers and sisters, we'll carry on where we left off in our series on the Fiqh of Tahara, and we are talking about things that nullify wudoo or nawaqid al-Tahara Sughra. So things that nullify the minor purity, which we are referring to is wudoo. The next chapter heading, or the next heading we'll take today, is with regards to losing consciousness, whether it is if someone's in a standing, sitting, or a position where they're lying down. So this mas'ala here with regards to losing consciousness or falling asleep, there's lots of khilaf between the scholars regarding this, whether this breaks the wudu or not. And amongst the ulama that differed in this regard are those that stipulated that the position of the person has an effect on whether or not losing consciousness or sleep nullifies the wudu. So the first opinion we'll touch on is held in the Maliki madhab. It's also the opinion of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And this is that deep sleep nullifies wudu, whereas light sleep does not nullify wudu. And this is regardless of the physical position of the person. So it doesn't matter whether they're laying down, they're standing, or whether they are sitting. If they're sleeping deeply, their wudu becomes nullified. And if they're sleeping lightly, then they still maintain their wudu. And the reason for this is because these scholars state that sleeping in and of itself is not a hadath. So sleeping in and of itself is not something that breaks somebody's wudu. Rather, sleep is madannat al-hadath, or someone sleeping is something that creates the question of whether or not they broke their wudu. So sleep or loss of consciousness refers to the inability to determine whether or not the wudu was broken. So the person can nullify the wudu in this case without even realizing. So that being said, if they are deeply sleeping, they are completely unaware of their surroundings, then this is madannat al-hadath, so they can easily nullify their wudu. Therefore, we would treat it as if they nullify their wudu with deep sleep. As opposed to somebody sleeping lightly, in which they are still aware of their surroundings and what's going on around them, so they would know whether or not they have broken the wudu. And I'm very sure everyone can relate to this type of light sleep. And to further explain this position here, would be to say that if sleep was a nullifier or a naqid of wudu in and of itself, then no matter how much sleep or what level of sleep one did, their wudu would be nullified. Similarly to how somebody, when they urinate, does not matter how much they urinate. If one drop of urine is emitted, or they urinate a liter, it doesn't make a difference. In both circumstances, the wudu is broken. However, However, sleep is a means of a person to pass wind or to touch their private parts without realizing it. Therefore, sleep nullifying wudu revolves around the person losing their senses and control over themselves. And when a person loses consciousness to the extent that they are unaware if they have passed wind or if they nullify the wudu otherwise, then their wudu is invalidated. But like we said, if a person maintains ihsas, they maintain their senses and awareness of what's happening around them, to the extent that if they had made a hadath, if they did pass wind, or if they touched their private part, or if they released, usually it's not the case, but if they were to release urine or they would defecate while they're sleeping, even though this is not really common, but for argument's sake, if they are in a position or they're sleeping so much so where they would realize this taking place, then their sleep wouldn't nullify their wudu. And like we said, this is regardless of the physical position. So just to rebuttal or refute rather those who say that it only would maintain their wudu with light sleep if they are sitting, or they stipulate if the person is standing, then in reality this argument that the person's physical position makes a difference holds no weight, because someone may easily pass wind or something while they're sitting down or while they're standing up. So the fact that their physical position may differ in how they're sleeping, this doesn't have any effect on the person's tahara, not the physical position. But like we said, rather, according to this opinion here, it's solely dependent on the level of their ihsas, or their senses, or awareness. And this view, it is al-qawl al-rajih, as we'll come to see, it is the most correct opinion. And it's simply because it combines or biyajma' between all of the adillah we have in this bab in a wholesome way. Okay? So if we were to combine all the evidences that the scholars use in this heading here, then we would see that this opinion, it reconciles between all of the evidences that the scholars present. And we do have a hadith from Safwan bin Asal, which some utilize as the evidence that sleep nullifies wudoo. Okay, it's used to prove that deep sleep rather nullifies wudoo. And we also have a hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu that they used to prove that sleep does not nullify wudoo, or rather that light sleep does not nullify wudoo. And we also have another narration in which Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they would be lying down and they would get up to pray. So they would be lying down resting or sleeping, and they would get up to pray without making wudu. Okay? And this would also serve as a rebuttal to the view that the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, which they used to say in regards to the position as well. So it rebuttals this hadith in regards to the position not having any weight as well. Okay? So if we were to look at all of the various narrations that are mentioned in this heading here, okay, some of them they mention different physical positions or circumstances and considerations. Okay, so if we were to look at all of these different ones, we will come to know for sure that there is some type of sleep that nullifies wudu, and that there is some type of sleep that doesn't nullify wudu. If we were to look at all the ahadith, and we'll come to take them inshallah here shortly. So the only consistent interpretation of these ahadith all together, okay, reconciling them with each other, holistically would accommodate that this opinion that we said of the level of sleep, whether it be light or deep, is the only factor that would have an effect on the tahara. So the factor of al-ihsas would be the only factor that we would take into consideration in this regard. And we have the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, in which he says, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نام حتى نفخ وكان إذا نام نفخ فأتاه بلال فآذنه بالصلاة فقام وصلى ولم يتوضأ في الحديث قصة وفي الحديث قصة. So Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he slept until he gasped for breath, and it was known that he would gasp for breath while he was sleeping. So Bilal came to him, and then he was given permission to make the adhan for the salah, wherein Rasulullah got up sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he performed the salah, and he did not repeat his wudu beforehand. And there is a story associated to this hadith here. So like I said, this is what appears to be al-qawl al-rajih, or the correct opinion. There is, however, other opinions which mention, for example, that light sleep does not nullify wudu only if the person is seated or standing, as we mentioned. And this is the opinion held by some of the Hanbali scholars. It's the opinion that's considered mu'tamad for the madhab al-Hanbali, the relied upon opinion. And they argue that sleep nullifies wudu generally, therefore all kinds of sleep nullify wudu by default. And they narrate a hadith from Ali radiallahu anhu, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was reported to have said that the eye is like the leather strap that ties up the anus or the backside. So whoever falls asleep, let him perform ablution. Meaning that when the eye shuts and the eye sleeps, then what prevents someone from passing wind, okay, is now untied, technically speaking. So the eye is like the tie to the anus. So if somebody sleeps, then khalas, they can maybe pass wind. If that was the case, so let him perform ablution. So in this hadith, the term that's used about the leather strap is usually what's used to tie a water skin or like a canteen, so no water would spill out of it. Okay? However, this hadith is weak, it is da'if, so it is not usable. And we have the hadith that we repeated several times going through this, that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam would command us when we are traveling not to take off our shoes for 3 days and nights except for seminal defilement, and not to do so on account of easing ourselves, passing water, or sleeping. So, brothers, ya akhwan in the back, ya shabab, can you guys just keep the noise level down, please? Jazakumullah khair. So in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he told the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum that when they were traveling, to not remove their footwear for 3 days and nights, meaning that they're able to wipe over their footwear in Tahara for 3 days and 3 nights, except for janaba, in which they would have to make a ghusl and remove them. So he told them not to do so, not to remove their footwear, so they can wipe over their footwear to make it easy for them when it comes to passing water or sleeping. So if the person were to urinate or sleep, then they would wipe over their socks, meaning that urinating or sleeping nullifies the wudoo. So the shahid from the hadith here is that sleeping nullifies the wudoo. They would have to repeat wudoo from sleeping. And in the hadith it does not specify a certain type of sleep or condition or status or so on. And we also have another hadith from Anas radiyallahu anhu. كان أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على عهده ينتظرون العشاء حتى تخفق رؤوسهم ثم يصلون ولا يتوضؤون. أخرجه أبو داود وصححه الدار قطني رحمه الله. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in his lifetime, or the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in his lifetime alayhi salatu wasalam, they used to wait for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for Salat al-Isha. And we know it's the sunnah to delay Salat al-Isha. Okay, it's the sunnah for all of the salawat to pray them on time, shortly when they enter, shortly after they enter, unless of course for considering the temperature. So we have a narration, or we have a dalil to show that if it was cold, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would pray the daily prayers, or the daytime prayers rather, like Dhuhr and Asr, early in this time. And if it was a very hot weather, then he would wait a little bit. And the wisdom behind it, Wallahu a'lam, is for it to cool down to make it easy on those coming out to the masjid. So by default though, we know that the salah is most rewardable when it's prayed early in its time, right? However, the sunnah for Salat al-Isha is to delay it slightly. Okay, the ulama, they mentioned that delaying it and praying it at the first third of the night is the most rewardable time to pray. Wallahu a'lam. So the Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they would be waiting for Rasulullah to come and lead them in Salat al-Isha. And in doing so, they would be tired. So what would happen is that they were so tired that they would be dozing off. And it mentions in the hadith that their heads would be like going down. Like, you know how when somebody's sleeping and their head starts to fall down, and then maybe they wake up and they start to doze off again and it falls down. So this is what the Sahaba would be doing, radiyallahu anhum, waiting for Salat al-Isha. Then when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would come, they would get up and pray Salat al-Isha behind him without repeating their wudoo. So therefore, we see from this hadith, and it is authentic, it is in Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, Dar Al Qutni, and in Muslim as well. We see in this hadith that someone who is that has light sleep has valid wudoo, because we know that usually if this is the case, if somebody's sleeping and they're dozing off and they're going back, their sleep is not too heavy. Okay, so we see from this hadith that somebody who is sleeping, where his head starts to bobble a little bit, that he still has valid wudoo. Because obviously the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they never repeated their wudoo. And in addition to them not repeating their wudoo, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not make inkar upon them for that. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he never told them, oh, go repair your wudu. Rather, he would see their condition when he would enter the masjid. They would get up and pray with him, and he wouldn't tell them otherwise. So that shows that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's tacit approval. He approved of that passively. Alayhi salatu wasalam. And in another version of this hadith, it specifies that some of the Sahaba would actually lay down as well. So this also debunks the opinion that says that position affects. So obviously we know that laying down is the default position which one sleeps. So if some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the physical orientation of their body would be naturally laying down as somebody sleeps, then this wouldn't affect the Tahara, or this hadith would show that that opinion does not have weight, as the physical orientation does not affect the Tahara in regards to the sleep. And then, like I said, we have another hadith from Anas radiallahu anh, that the companions of Allah's Messenger used to wait for the prayer lying on their sides, and some of them used to sleep, then get up for the prayer. And then we have even another hadith from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, in which he mentions, I spent one night in the house of my mother's sister. So the Maymuna radiallahu anha, which is who? Who is Maymuna radiallahu anha? Maymuna is who? The wife of Rasulullah, our mother, alayha radwanullahi ta'ala wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ibn Abbas, he spent the night in the Khalid of Ibn Abbas is Maymuna radiallahu anha. He spent the night in her house. And obviously this is the house of Rasulullah, the daughter of Al-Harith, and he said to her, awake me when the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam stands to pray. So she woke him up when the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood up for prayer. So Ibn Abbas, he wanted to pray al-Qiyam ma'a Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he said, I stood on his left side. And we know that the Imam is the one who stands on the left side. Then he took hold of my hand and he made me stand on his right side. So Rasulullah is showing where the Imam stands as opposed to the one who is being led. The Imam, if it's just two people, the Imam stands on the left side and the one who is being led on the right. And he took hold of my hand and made me stand on his right side. And whenever I dozed off, he took hold of my earlobe and made me alert. So when Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu would be praying with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, while he was standing in prayer, he would start to doze off. Then how would Rasulullah get his attention and wake him back up? He would pull on his earlobe. So the shahid from this hadith is, had sleep, okay, this shows while he's standing, of course, and this dalil is used by those who say sleep while one's standing doesn't nullify wudu. Is based off of this hadith. They show that Ibn Abbas was sleeping, but he was standing. However, we see from the other hadith, the Sahaba were laying down and some were sitting while they were waiting for Salah, and still that never nullified their wudu. But the shahid is that had sleep nullified wudu, then the Rasulullah wouldn't have simply pulled his earlobe to wake him back up. He would have what? Told him to, or he would have signaled to him to go leave Salah and repeat his wudu. Okay? And the narrator, he said that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he observed 11 raka'at, and then he then sat with his legs drawn and wrapped in his garment and slept so that I can hear his breathing while asleep. And then dawn appeared, so he observed 2 short rak'ahs of prayer. So that even in the latter part of this hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he finished his qiyam, he would sit to rest for a little bit with his legs wrapped up with his garment, and then he would sleep until you can hear his breathing, like we mentioned in the other narration as well. His breathing would become heavy, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was sleeping, and then when dawn appeared, when the Fajr would enter, he would get up and pray 2 short rak'ah, which is the sunnah of Salat al-Fajr. And there's no mention of repetition of wudu. So even we have from 2 angles that the sleep doesn't nullify wudu in this hadith, from Ibn Abbas himself and from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. So as we can see from this, that the way that a person sleeps, like their orientation, it is not really an important factor, but what is whether the person loses or retains their ihsas or their senses. So much so where they're no longer able to control their bodily functions. So they're not aware of what's happening with their body. They can pass wind, they can touch their private part, they can maybe pass urine or something, and they're not aware of what's happening. This is what would be considered to invalidate the wudoo. Because we said that sleep in and of itself isn't considered, according to the more correct opinion, it isn't considered al-hadath in and of itself, it is madannat al-hadath. So it's not considered a nullifier in and of itself, but it is considered to be something that is, there's room for it to nullify, or madanna is, I don't know how we can translate that exactly, but like an expected position or time when somebody can nullify their wudoo. There is also, for the sake of knowing the differences, there is also another opinion in this bab which mentions that light sleep doesn't nullify wudoo only if the person is seated firmly on one's bottom. And this is held by a Shafi'i, and they say this is mu'tamad al-Shafi'i, wallahu a'lam. And they use the hadith that we just mentioned prior to, of the hadith of Anas radiallahu an, which the Sahaba would wait for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam until their heads would start to fall. Okay, so their point is that it shows that they were sleeping, but they were seated firmly on their bottoms. Okay? And we can see even from the wording of the hadith here that they interpreted this hadith to refer to only sitting, even though that the hadith doesn't specify or does not even speak about the orientation of the Sahaba. It says that they used to wait for Rasulullah for Salat al-Isha and they would be resting until their heads would start to fall. So somebody could technically be lying on their side and their heads can start to fall. Somebody can be sitting and have the same thing. And for argument's sake, somebody can even be leaning against the wall, sleeping, and his head can start to fall, or resting rather, and his head will start to droop down. But like we said, the other hadith prove otherwise. There is also a fourth opinion that all sleep nullifies wudoo, and it's held by Ishaq ibn Rahway, and it's an opinion in the Shafi'i madhab and held by al-Muzani as well. And that is based off of the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu, that the eye is like the leather strap that supposedly that Rasulullah said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the eye is like the leather strap that ties up the anus, so if one falls asleep, let it perform wudoo. However, we said that this hadith is weak, so it is not usable, and as a result, the opinion based off of it is a weak opinion. Wallahu a'lam. And in addition to that, they also compared somebody sleeping to somebody being fully unconscious. However, and being fully unconscious is a nullifier by a ijma'. So if somebody loses their consciousness completely, by a ijma' they lost their wudoo. So they compared the sleep to fully losing the consciousness. But An-Nawawi rahimahullah, he responded and he highlighted the difference between total unconsciousness and light sleep. There is also another opinion as well that's mentioned, and that's that light sleep doesn't nullify wudoo only if the person is praying. And they base that off of what? The hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Okay, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he mentioned this in his majmu', even though this is not his opinion, but he made mention of it, that the person only would nullify, or that rather the person's wudoo wouldn't be affected by light sleep only if they are praying. And they also used another hadith that mentions that if the abd falls asleep in prayer, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala boasts about him to the angels. And he said, look at my abd, his soul is with me while his body is prostrating bayna yaday. However, this hadith is weak, okay? And in addition, let's say that the other hadith that we mentioned of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu praying with Rasulullah and then his earlobe being pulled to make him alerted once again, that hadith is authentic, so how they use that hadith only, holds more weight. However, this hadith is weak, and it also contradicts something that is known in an authentic hadith, which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he commands that if somebody is praying and they're in such a sleepy condition, that they should stop prayer and rest, because the person may reach a point where they do not know what they are saying. And they could be making dua on themselves and cursing themselves. They will not know what they're saying. They could be even misreading the Quran. They don't know what they're saying. So this also shows that even the meaning in this hadith is incorrect. Wallahu a'lam. There is also a sixth opinion in this mas'ala here, and we're going into the depth just for the sake of knowing what exists out there, even though the first opinion that we mentioned, we said it's al-rajih, or the more correct one, is that this is the opinion of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, according to Ibn Abidin. He says that sleep only nullifies wudoo if the person is lying down or leaning on one side of his body. So if the person is slanted over sitting down or laying down, then that's the only position in which sleep nullifies wudoo. And they use that, and they used to support this opinion a weak hadith in which says that Rasulullah said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that inna al-wudoo ala man nama, or that wudoo or performing wudoo is only necessary for one who sleeps lying down. For when he lies down, his joints are relaxed. Okay? But this hadith, like we said, is weak. And then they also use another weak hadith that has a similar meaning, but there's no point of mentioning that, or actually multiple ahadith that are all weak. And there is also a seventh opinion that sleep doesn't nullify wudu at all, and this is attributed to Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib and attributed to Imam Ahmad, but Al-Khallal, he says that it's incorrect. Al-Khallal is a scholar of the Hanbali madhab, said this is incorrectly attributed to Imam Ahmad. And I think the evidence that we mentioned clearly illustrates that there is the further hadith we mentioned when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on travel. He commanded them to not remove their socks for 3 days and 3 nights, and that they can wipe over them, except, and one of the things mentioned is from sleep. So we know that, and that hadith is authentic. So it clearly invalidates this opinion, or clearly negates this opinion that sleep doesn't nullify wudu at all, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told them that they can make wudu from sleep. They should make wudu, and from the things they should, by wiping over the socks, and one of the things he mentioned was from sleep. So we see that opinion is also weak as well. Then there is also some other opinions. I don't want to go too much into further depth in this. There is also other opinions that state that the length of sleep is what invalidates the wudu. So if somebody has a short sleep, okay, their wudu is not invalidated, as opposed to somebody having a long sleep. So if somebody sleeps for a long period of time, then that would be what invalidates wudu. And that opinion is attributed to Imam Malik, and it's a view in the Hanbali madhab. And like I said, they all revolve around the same ahadith that we're mentioning, but with slightly different interpretations. And we said that some of the ahadith that are mentioned, they are weak in this regard. Okay. And then we know that, and we'll take this as the last thing, we'll conclude with this inshallah. The loss of consciousness. If a person loses their mind, or becomes intoxicated, or falls into a coma, or faints, or overdoses on medication, or has a seizure, or otherwise loses consciousness, they must make wudoo. And this is by ijma' of the ulama. Because this is by consensus pertaining to one having his aql, one being sane. Because we know that if somebody has junoon or the majnoon, they lose their aql, then, or they're being unconscious, these are things by ijma' that one would have to repeat wudoo from. So losing your sanity or your consciousness, by ijma' you would have to repeat wudoo, and this ijma' is mentioned by Ibn al-Mundhir, Ibn Qudamah, and An-Nawawi, rahimahumullah. There's only a slight disagreement amongst them in that regard, and that is with regards to the Shafi'i madhab, as to how intoxicated somebody would have to be in order for the wudu to be nullified. And with this, inshallah, we will conclude. So just want to summarize and sum up that the qawl al-rajih, as we said, is that light sleep in which one still has his ihsas or his senses, and he is still maintaining his awareness of what's happening to his body or what's around him, this light sleep does not nullify wudu. And this, for example, let's say somebody wakes up for Salat al-Fajr and they make wudu, they're waiting to pray with their family, they're waiting to go to the masjid, so they're just lying down. They might feel very relaxed, so they're so relaxed, so they start to kind of doze off, but they're still aware of what's happening around them. Okay, or somebody, mathalan, they're sleeping and they're in a car ride, they're kind of dozing off, they're soothing to the sound of the road, but they're still, obviously I'm talking about the passenger here, we don't want somebody, a driver falling asleep, but ma'al al-kalam, anyways. So in this regard, some light sleep, okay, it doesn't nullify wudu, as long as somebody maintains ihsas, their senses and their awareness of their body and their surroundings. Whereas a deeper sleep, where somebody loses ihsas, they lose their senses and their awareness of their surroundings and their body, is what would nullify wudu. And as we said, loss of al-aql, loss of sanity or consciousness nullifies wudu. Okay, loss of sanity, somebody loses their mind by intoxication, they become insane, they go into a coma or something. So somebody loses their mind by insanity or by unconsciousness, by ijma', they have nullified the wudu. And next class, inshallah, we'll begin speaking about the things that necessitate major ritual ablution, or things that necessitate al-ghusl, things that nullify your tahara, so they necessitate major tahara. Okay? With this, we will conclude. If somebody has any questions, you may feel free to ask. Otherwise, jazakallahu khairan for your attentive listening. Wa barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.